Right then, weekend waffle time, and this time I am recording it at the weekend, so off to a good start. So, what I've been thinking about this week, thinking a little bit about the previous two waffles, was where are games going? So, the current generation has lasted a long time, so if we take the Xbox at the end of 2005, so we're looking at 7 years or potentially 8 years. This is quite a long time for a generation. And where to go next? And I've been thinking back to the end of the 16-bit era, which is, at least in my opinion, I think we are now reaching a point where we were back then. So at the end of the 16-bit era, the SNES and the Mega Drive were reaching the end of their lifespans, and at that point the popular game genre seemed to be platformers, so your Sonic, Mario type games, and then other games like Aladdin and whatnot, and Earthworm Jim. And I think that they reached a natural conclusion. Publishers were putting these games out because they sold, but they seemed to hit a point where I think everything that could be said had been said. And there was a need really just for something to shock the industry into coming up with something new. And as I've said before, this seems to be Doom. So the problem there was the current consoles were not able to do Doom. I know the SNES later had it with the Super FX 2 chip, but as they were, this was a generational thing. And in the arcades we had games like Ridge Racer and Daytona and Virtua Fighter, which were not possible on the consoles. And I think there was a need for a new generation, and this was clearly the PlayStation and the Saturn, but there was this gap, this middle generation with having 3DO, Jaguar, etc. And the games on it, or games on these machines, whilst not being remembered as classics, as I mentioned before, they were trying to break new ground. So games like the full motion video games like Night Trap and Corpse Killer and Tomcat Alley on the Mega CD, Microcosm, they were trying to become more cinematic, more or maybe more immersive, and trying to break away from platformer games. So it seemed that there was an opportunity there for developers to really just experiment and do something new. I think they were being influenced by the arcades and even Doom, but there was a new ground to be broken. And I think whilst the games, some of them worked, some of them didn't, I think we have got games like Need for Speed and Road Rash that really did, and I suppose even Wing Commander 3, that were successful. So it was a survival of the fittest. So I think that almost middle generation between 16 and 32-bit games made a point, and it was something to be commended to try and break out of this pattern of releasing platformer games. Not that they were the only games on the 16-bit platforms, but they seemed to be the predominant genre, and as I said, it was stagnating. So the PlayStation, on the other hand, knew what it was trying to do. It at the beginning, it wasn't trying to find a new genre. It was almost was a genre. It was the arcade. Ridge Racer, as an example, took about 6 months to convert to the PlayStation 1. So it was almost like Sony had deliberately taken the hardware from the arcades and said, okay, how much of this can we pack into a console? So it knew what the genre was. It was trying to bring arcade 3D games to the home, and in a way the same with the Saturn. But now there's a similar pattern. We've got these FPS games where with Doom this was the new genre, but now it's getting long in the tooth. So we're now in a similar situation where we were with platformer games, where it's very difficult to innovate, and particularly with the current hardware, there's a new generation coming out, so what are we going to see? And I think it's difficult to predict what will happen, and looking at the new Unreal Engine, it's perhaps possible to see what's happening, but are we still going to have the same types of games? So for FPS games, so first person shooters, and those kind of games are racing games where it's just more and more graphical detail, but the gameplay is roughly the same. But could we see a similar pattern to the 3DO, 32X and Jaguar, where we have scope for a bit of experimentation? And I think we see this with the Wii and the Kinect, and the games on these platforms are a bit hit and miss. I think the Wii's been relatively successful, but the Kinect, I think developers still don't know what to do with it. But perhaps, looking back in 10 years' time, there will be a few new games that come out for these platforms that succeed. So I think the difficult thing is to predict what types of games are we now starting to see emerge that will be popular on next generation consoles. And I think perhaps one of them is the redevelopment of indie games, almost going back, but that doesn't really need more horsepower, so I think we can do that on existing hardware. But I think the main problem this time, in the unique situation we are in, is that in the past consoles could always, or even home computers, could look at arcade games or the arcades and say, this is the future. But now arcade machines use the same hardware as consoles, and this has been the case since the Naomi board and the Dreamcast, and even the Xbox based arcades. So where do we go? I'm not sure. Difficult one. I really am not sure. I think the place to look are the games on the Wii and the Kinect, which seem to be successful, and I find it hard to actually name them. I think in 5 years' time we might be able to look back and say, okay, the beginnings of the games that's successful in the next generation started here. Perhaps. It's difficult. Right, okay, enough waffling on that. Another thing, I have hit 100 subscribers, so I just wish to thank everyone who's tuned in and subscribed and was willing to hear me waffle and grumble over old games, and I just wish to say thank you for everyone who supported me. So Mark, Steve, Alex and Dave and all the others who've gone out of their way to try and help bring some publicity, for want of a better word, to my channel, and bring people along to subscribe it if they like it, and if they don't, that's fine. So I just like to express my gratitude to everyone who's looked at the channel, looked at the videos, liked, disliked, although very few people have actually disliked, so I'm not complaining there. But comments, feedback, fantastic. The response has been really good. So, as someone once explained to me, the first 100 subscribers are the hardest 100 that you will ever get. So I'm hoping it's upwards and onwards from here. So hopefully I'll do another video at 200, fingers crossed. So thanks for watching. There was one more thing I forgot to mention. This week I went on an Amiga pilgrimage, for want of a better word. So yeah, I mentioned that I might do a bit of an update on it in this weekend waffle, but I'm tired, I'm knackered, I've driven a long way, so I think I'll leave that perhaps until midweek, or I might even leave it until next weekend. So it gives me a chance to have a think about it and make something consistent about I suppose all the things I've learned, which are quite a lot. Yeah, it was a good day. So next time.